Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jan Costner, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Relations and Membership for the Chicagoland Chamber. I hope you all are having a great time today, and the Exchange is doing a lot of great business for you all. I'm also hearing that there have been hundreds of connections, so I look forward to hearing more about how those all play out over the next several months. It is now my pleasure to introduce this next panel, Pivoting Our Business Strategy with Marketing and Tech, presented by Camelot. It's Illinois' private lottery manager and our exchange sponsor. So thank you so much for supporting us. Did you know that the funds from the lottery go to fund education in the state, and that there's retail partners receive commissions on winning tickets? That is it's one of the 5 revenue sources for the state, delivering more than $21 billion in revenues. This is such a great economic engine for the state. From July to December, Camelot sales have gone up over 18% over the previous period. And most important of all, they have paid out more than $1 billion to the winners. Maybe I'll be one of those. This is because they have an excellent marketing campaign, and they pivoted quickly once the lockdown began. So I'd like you all to welcome James Bickford, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Camelot. He has worked all over the world in New Zealand, Singapore, and London, helping brands successfully elevate their visibility, including an iconic brand such as McDonald's. He's also a sought-after thought leader and has been interviewed by the BBC and other high-profile networks and publications. He just moved to Chicago right when the pandemic began, so when we get out of this, I think everyone on here needs to take him out for a tour of Chicago to their favorite places. Next, we have Kelsey Young, who's a vice president of strategy. She's worked across many industries to create plans and strategies that created results for her companies. She also worked, which I think is really interesting, at the French Ministry of Education in France, where she gained global mindset that has played a big role in her success. And finally, but not least, we have Mark Bradford, who's the VP of Digital Performance and Experience. He has spent many years in product development for companies such as Leapfrog and Blue Software. And if I read it correctly, he also received his law degree. So this really is the A team of marketing. I will now kick this over to Kelsey to get the panel going. Kelsey?
Great. Thank you, Jan, and thank you everyone for joining. As Jan mentioned at the top of our session, the focus today is on how we pivoted our strategy for the Illinois Lottery through marketing and technology. And what we'd like to do is take you through the journey of how we set foundations over the course of a couple years that enabled us to pivot the business really quickly and effectively when we needed to in the last year, just as things, especially in our retail environment, have changed so dramatically and been so significantly impacted by COVID. So a few years ago, when Camelot took over as private manager of the lottery, we recognized at that point that the brand had really stagnated and we were having difficulty breaking through to new, younger customers and really keeping the brand alive in a world that was constantly changing and had increasing competition. So out of that, in late 2018, so a couple years ago at this point, we initiated an effort focused on refreshing the Illinois Lottery brand. And when I say that, we're not talking about, the logo and the colors or anything like that. We're really talking about the purpose of the brand, the direction we were taking it, and the brand identity that flows through the organization. So back at that point in time, James, who's with us today, was not yet our chief commercial officer. He was an advisor for us. As Jan mentioned, he had experience advising a multitude of brands across the world. And so we brought him in as an advisor to guide us through that brand definition process. And I actually want to hand over to you, James, just to tell us a little bit about, what this image means that everyone's looking at and what it was like to take us through that journey of defining our brand and our purpose at that point in time.
Great, and thanks, Kelsey. And Jan, thank you so much for having us at Exchange 21. It's a real honor to be part of this program. Let's kick into it. I think that one of the things for me that's so important about thinking about pivoting, however big or small your company is, whether you're 2 people, whether you're 200 people, or whether you're 2,000 people, is sometimes your brand can get a bit lost. You wake up one day and you think, it's my brand and what it stands for and what we want our customers to believe, our partners, and in our case, our stakeholders, the state. Is it right? Is it right for today? Is it right for the future? And when I was asked by Camelot to come and look at the Illinois Lottery brand, it was very clear very early on that the Illinois Lottery was actually entering a new phase for its brand, and really needed just to take some time to, or a time out, as they say here, to reflect on what that brand wanted to be moving forward. And this slide really is to try and explain that. For many of us in the conference over this few days, we'll be thinking about our business and where it is, and also what does our brand stand for, certainly in the times of that we live in today. And for the Illinois Lottery, our brand was very much on the left of this slide. There was no real central purpose. We'd kind of lost our way a bit. We'd just become a business selling products rather than a brand building relationships and partnerships for the future in a world where we're all consumers and brand is so important to us. So what we did was we really decided to take a very good look at ourselves as a brand, what we stood for, what we were here to do and to deliver, not just for our players, for our partners, for the state, for the Common School Fund, but also for our employees. And we unpacked our brand and found actually that our brand was really in the past. It was very old school. It hadn't kept up with the times. It certainly wasn't a forward-thinking brand. And actually, it was a brand that had lost, I think, a bit of its humanity, that human side that is so important to brands today. So what we did very simply was go through a process. It took about 3-4 months. Importantly, that process was led by the CEO of the company, the leader of the company. So if you're the boss of your own business, it's important that you champion the change and you champion that with all your senior leadership team, or if you're a small company, with all those people in your company, and that they feel genuinely part of that journey that you're going to go through to change. And there are lots of elements of that, and I'm not going to go into too much depth, but the most important element is to redefine what the purpose is of your company. There's a great friend of mine who runs a bakery in London, and he set up his bakery because he had one goal. And it could be as simple as that, going back to the very beginning of why you woke up that day and decided, you know what, I'm going to go and build a company. I'm going to go and run a company. I'm going to go and be part of a company because this is what they believe in. This is what their purpose is beyond just selling products or services. And in our case, after a lot of work, our purpose landed on to be a champion for the people of Illinois. So the Illinois Lottery's purpose in life is to be a champion for the people of Illinois. And from that purpose, that can galvanize everyone to one singular thought, one voice, one ambition, one motivation, one future that they can all work towards and also judge themselves and their business on. So in our case, we moved from a very fragmented business and brand through one purpose, a champion for the people of Illinois, that gave us a very singular point of view, which is on the right-hand side, that single circle, which then was able to go back into the business with that single flag in the ground and ask of the business, how do we go and deliver that? How do we go and deliver a champion for the people of Illinois?
Yeah, thanks, James. And I think that's a perfect segue. Greg, if you don't mind moving on to the next page. I think, as we all probably are very familiar, it's one thing to put ideas down on paper, and it's quite another thing to actually make them real and bring them through and bring them to life in our organizations. So once we had done the work that James talked about, it was really our next step to make sure that this work flowed through everything that we were doing, starting with our people and our strategy. And this is what we often refer to and continuously talk about as an on the bus kind of moment. So we're our leaders on the bus with the direction that we were going. We're the people throughout the organization aligned to that purpose that we had defined and the implications that it had on what we were going to do and how we were looking at the business going forward. So at that moment, both James and Mark actually had been working for our parent company, which was a global lottery services company, and still is. And we, as part of this initiative to make sure that our leadership was fully on board, that we had all the capabilities that we needed, we brought both Mark and James on full time into the Illinois. So I just wanted to start with you, James. As you came into the role as Chief Commercial Officer, you took on marketing, retail, digital, and product, which included all of our agency relationships and everything at the time that we were really looking to bring this purpose to life. Can you just tell us about what it meant to go from where we were, which you described as kind of fragmented, and clearly not everybody even knew the purpose at that point, much less knew what they could do to deliver to it. Can you just talk about building up that commercial function, especially in marketing, to kind of meet the demands that our purpose put forward for us?
Yeah, sure. I just to go back upstream a bit, I think one of the things that we found very early on was that we had to be an organization that really looked at our talent. And did we have the right talent in the right place for the right time? Did we have the talent that could help us pivot to be a champion for the people of Illinois? And that's really the hard work starts then. And I think for us as an organization, we took a long, hard look at ourselves, actually, before we did anything else. And again, it doesn't matter how big your business is. And I actually, when I came to the Illinois Lottery, I was really surprised of how small it is in terms of the number of people running a $3 billion business. So it's not about how many people you have. It's about putting the right talent in the right place. And I think that was the first thing that we understood. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort working with our employees and our talent and recruiting new talent to help us understand how we could take that purpose, put it at the center of our organization, but most importantly, have the people who we know and trust and collaborate and co-create with to deliver that purpose moving forward. So that leadership team was absolutely crucial in understanding that pathway. And we are still working on that pathway today. People, talent and direction, as someone once told me, never sleeps. And so we're always looking at that, ensuring that we are delivering to that purpose to be the champion for the people of Illinois. Just on marketing, what was interesting was we also looked at our model in marketing, and I think if we're visualizing the slide before, marketing, digital, retail, and product, which is really the four pillars of our commercial engine in Camelot here in Illinois, was very siloed. It was very old-fashioned in the way it went about its work. And one of the things that truly galvanized those four areas, those four disciplines of our business, was this purpose and the talent we put behind it. And today, we have one commercial team that truly has one rhythm, one voice, one ambition that constantly goes back to that purpose we created. And that takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of honesty. It takes a lot of looking at each other and supporting and helping to get to that rhythm that we believe we've started to get to now. And one of those areas that we really looked at was how did we deliver marketing? For some of us, We have big budgets. For some of us, we have very small budgets. For some of us, we actually do a lot of marketing ourselves if we're a very small business. But still, marketing is an integral part of any brand. And one area that we did do was look at, cost savings and actually bring in a lot of our own production work into our business. And why did we do that? Was really for three reasons. One, to reduce cost. Two, to have ownership of a lot of the production work that we were farming out. And when I talk about production, I mean design and artwork, printing, not in our case, our TV and what we call above the line assets. And we thought, well, that would be an interesting idea. What if we actually created our own internal studio to take on those assets? And that studio started about 9-10 months ago with one person. We now have 6 people in that studio. And one of the things that truly did prove out to be a champion of the people of Illinois was the agility and the speed that we could get comms to market. And today now through that studio, we're producing between 30 and 40 different pieces of communications a day. And it's proven to us that we can talk to our customers much faster, much smarter, much more targeted, which Mark will talk about in a minute. And also with our retail network, we have a much more fluid relationship in terms of communications because we can own much more what our own studio can deliver. And when it comes to agencies and partnerships, I think one of the things that we did learn was we were probably relying too much on strategic direction from our agencies. And I think that was probably because we weren't as confident before our pivot that we could. And that goes back to talent. If you own your strategy, you need a leadership team that can go and deliver it. And yes, our agencies and partners are super critical to us. But in terms of direction, decision-making, we've very much become more directional now in those partnerships that we have. We changed our media agency to a much more dynamic, engaging, agile, and forward-thinking agency who could help us on that journey of our purpose. And just quickly on that, I think, and I learned this very early on with other businesses with purpose. When you look at your partners, do they believe in your purpose, or are they just delivering you a product or a service for your business? And someone who taught me that very well actually was Samsung. Samsung, when they look for partners, they look for partners who genuinely believe in Samsung's values and their purpose. And if you can find partners and talk to them about what your values are, what your purpose is, and it's beyond just the price, you will get a lot more value out of the relationship that you have. And secondly, you'll find that those partners are working towards your values and your purpose as well. And I think that's really valuable if you're going to be a purpose-led business.
Yeah, and I think beyond that, at the time that we were really going through all of this, the agency piece was not and will never be in a set of easy decisions to make. So I think that's the other view on it is, we made challenging people decisions. We worked hard to make sure that we had the right people in the organization, but those agency conversations as well are ones that were really important and I think felt quite daunting at the time that we were going through some of those transitions, but ended up being really, we look back and they were really pivotal decisions to make at that point in time to make sure that we had that alignment and that they were complementing the skills that we had internally in the right way.
Right.
Cool.
Sorry, Kelsey, just quickly, I think what's also important, again, just thinking about size, whether you are a small business or 4 or 5 people with partners, going back to the bakery, the partners that my friend has in his bakery, the person who supplies his flour, the person who supplies his equipment, they're very, very important to his business. And in a small business like that, we tend to call it family, right? We don't tend to call, when you're in a big multinational, you don't tend to call your partners family. but it's the same concept. If you're a small business and you have partners who feel like they're part of your wider family, they're delivering on your values as well. So it's just scaling up that concept into just a larger organization.
Great, thanks. And Mark, at the same time, you came in and joined us as the VP of Digital Performance and Experience, which was a new, really adapted role for us based on one of those critical capability gaps, or a number of the capability gaps that we had identified. So just curious, when you came in and were charged with this challenge of building out this area of the business, what did you look for, and how did you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, it was multifaceted, and it was really fun and hard and exciting all at the same time. I'd come from a performance digital background and had been applying it in the context of our parent company from a product perspective. And so the really fun part of joining the Illinois group was really getting to a place of focus and getting to a place of that common purpose that you're starting to see in this slide of discipline and people on the bus. What does that bus really symbolize? It's a group of people all kind of traveling together towards a common goal. And for us, it was really important to quickly assess who we had in our organization that could be agile and kind of a force multiplier and could quickly adapt to a new level of expectations, and potentially with even less resources that they were used to dealing with at the time because of all the things going on in the marketplace and with COVID and so forth. It clearly wasn't an easy thing. And so we looked for things that I think are attributable to companies of all shapes and sizes, business levels, and so forth. And I urge you to ask me questions as follow-ups to this. But we looked for, first and foremost, was a performance mindset. So what James said was, this is about trading, this is about commercial outcomes. And prior to that, I think there was a degree of that, but with everything going on in the world, it became about how do we create an experience that's consistent with our brand, that is for the people, that also connects to the core value propositions of our brand in terms of advocacy and hope and all the wonderful like happiness that can go along with being entertained online, and at the same time have that commercial mindset. And that's not an easy thing to find amongst a group of people. So for us, it was continuing on that idea that James brought up, is looking at the talent that you had, but also looking for talent that you didn't have and bringing those understanding how to bring those people in. And one of the things that I'll mention in the coming slides that you'll see in a second is that idea and that discipline is transferable to all companies of shapes and sizes, like I said. So for us, it was a question of that commercial and performance mindset, really understanding and embracing the fact that circumstances in the world around us was very dynamic. And I'm being, obviously, I'm sugarcoating that because it was really hard. It was hard on everyone. It was hard on all of us being a part of the team, but it was also hard on us being Illini and Chicagoans and just living in this world. And so it was creating that sense of hope, both in our jobs, but as constituents of the state of Illinois. So for us, it was a question of enabling that brand and these dynamic circumstances into calls to actions and measurable outcomes and hypotheses and data models. And I thought a lot about this, like walking into this conversation that I shared with some of you as we were preparing. I could go on and on about really, really big topics like analytics and segments and so forth. But I also have to recognize that a lot of the folks that are listening right now are smaller and medium-sized businesses. And one of the things that I'd encourage us all to think about is how these ideas and disciplines and principles that we'll talk about in the coming slides can be shaped and utilized for all levels of business, all kinds of business, all shapes and sizes, like we talk about. So at the end of the day, what's universal? Clear commercial goals. What do we need? How do we think about our funnel of acquisitions? How do we think about our funnel of retention and loyalty? How do we use the tools available to us at a reasonable cost trajectory to make that possible? Because different companies have different tolerances for that. And what I hope that most people come away with, inspired from this conversation, is that those tools and those disciplines are available to all of us. And it's really more of a question of being disciplined and being methodical about how we operate, that will create that sense of control in a world that feels very uncontrollable right now. So we looked at the talent, we looked at the discipline, we looked at the methodology, and then in parallel, we tried to build what is really important for us is an acquisition and a CRM engine. And by acquisition is, how do you bring awareness to the public? How do you bring them through a journey into our brand? And how do you measure that journey? And how do you convert those folks into customers that are delighted by what you have to offer? And then how do you continue to be a part of their life in a positive and meaningful way?
I think also one of the things that was, I think, if we're thinking of pivots that you certainly bought early on, was moving digital away from being a marketing team, a digital marketing team, into a digital trading team.
Yeah.
That mindset, I think, was quite inspiring and kind of opened us up to much bigger thinking than just using digital as a way to market ourselves. This change of mindset into actually we're trading online. Yes, we're still using marketing materials, but that mindset of trading, what am I selling? What am I going to get back for this investment that I'm making? I think certainly did change, we know it did change the way the whole business now thinks about our digital journey. And I think going to your point about, whether we're small, medium, or large, whether we're selling cakes or we're selling lottery tickets or we're selling cars, understanding that your social and digital strategy mentality should be about trading rather than just, how many likes do I get on my Instagram page?
And I think that's even if you look at my role and the fact that it has the word both performance and experience in it, it speaks to that. We're no matter what you're doing, whether it's baking, dry cleaning, or as my dad did, or lottery, there's an experience that's inevitable and just intrinsic to what we're doing. But then there's a measurable outcome that I think we have to stay disciplined to. And I think that connects to the slides that we're about to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the last thing before we move on is across the bit. So Mark talked a lot about measuring results through digital, which I think, it's natural in an area that's data rich within a business. But I think one of the really important things we did at this point was we used a framework called objectives and key results, which is effectively just having clear goals and making sure that all of those goals have some way of being measured. We use that to flow through to the entire company. So whether you're the CEO or the receptionist, what your objectives are, how they're going to be measured, and how that rolls up to the overall objectives of the business. So this was a really important tool for us in that it gave us the ability to say, whether I have data coming through every minute of every hour of every day and can really clearly measure what I'm doing, or whether I need to be a little bit more creative and start to measure outcomes through maybe more qualitative measures, or feedback cycles, or even time to complete things. We were finding ways to make sure that mentality was really embedded throughout the org. All right, and I think with that we can go ahead. Perfect. Thank you, Greg. So through this process of transition, which really, I don't want to undersell it. It was, over a year solid of kind of working hard at making sure that all of these things were in place. We did see ourselves kind of over time building up some organizational confidence and certainly filling in a lot of those capability gaps that we were talking about. And this became especially important around this time last year when we, like pretty much every other business, were in a position where we had to pivot pretty quickly to adjust to the changing environment around us. And for us, that hit especially hard in our retail channel, where obviously every retailer across the state was impacted in some way by closures, by civil unrest, by the multitude of things that have gone on in the past year. So really coming into this, the tools that we had built that we needed and relied heavily upon were one, having that authentic brand defined, two, having the organization focused and aligned around those objectives that we were working toward, and three, having some tools in place, especially some of those that Mark talked about, to be really agile. And when James mentioned the studio, that's another great example of this is, we had to be ready to pivot on a dime, if you will, and the work that we had done in the years leading up to this really allowed us to be. So Mark, just to continue on that thread, we obviously were hit pretty hard in retail last year and had to make some big changes there that were slower to get into practice. With that impact in the retail channel, how did you look at the digital channel, which obviously we were really fortunate to have at that time, but suddenly there was an opportunity that more or less came overnight in terms of how we leveraged that channel. Can you just talk a bit about that pivot?
Yeah, I think there's two big pillars to that, and I want to connect it to this lifelong Chicagoan gift that we're seeing here, and I am a lifelong Chicagoan, which is very near and dear to my heart. I mean, for those of you that have spent any time here, the story of those years when the Bulls dominated, and it connects back to that bus, right? Like the chemistry, the success of that era wasn't just built on the playbook, which we created. And it is important to note here, which it was a huge thing. We created a playbook for how we were going to create empathy online and how we were going to move that personal relationship from the retail experience to the digital experience. And fortunately, we had a CRM engine that was already sort of in its early stages, and it was about really propelling that customer relationship management engine forward. And as a small business, which some of you are, and as a medium-sized business, what I would urge you to think about is you don't have to have a sales force or a big CRM expensive tool to do that. You need to have the discipline and the habit of capturing your leads, of understanding who they are, of being able to reference them, of remembering who they are, and understanding how to kind of segment them into areas of communication and ways to communicate with them. And then going back to that other pillar that is just inevitably connected is the people and those people on the bus. What happens in the locker room? What happens on the bus? That chemistry and that playbook all together, and the coaching and the tools that were all happening in the Berto Center by where I live, by the way. Like, those were the things that made those teams so successful. That's what really created a dynasty for the Bulls that, will live on forever. And I hope, by the way, that we get it back soon. But in the end, it's not just one thing. It's the talent, it's the playbooks, it's the discipline, it's the chemistry, it's what happens in the locker room, and it's the leadership of the people on the team. Because you can only go so far with the title of VP or an owner or whatever it is. But if everyone isn't really closely connected to that singular mission of winning, or whatever it is that your brand stands for, you're going to struggle. And there are moments, for those of you that remember this era, when it just rained down threes. Michael shrugged and he walked away and he's like, yep, I've lived for this moment for my whole life and everything is just sinking for me. But there was other moments, and those of you from Chicago know, when he came out there with a temperature of 103 degrees and what shouldn't have even been playing. And there was others on that court at the same time that shouldn't have even been playing. And they won. And they won because they had the right habits, they had the right chemistry, they had the right tools. And for us, that's what I hope and I think and I know that we're going through right now, which is above and beyond the talent that we've already talked about. It's that chemistry. It's the connection of data for us. Yes, we have systems that some businesses don't have the benefit of having, but I assure you, it can all be scaled up and down no matter what. And it's a question of discipline and heart and mindset relative to our brand, our community, and that inspiration and happiness and hope that we wanted to inspire.
Well,
I think the Bulls did that here
yeah.
for a long, long time.
Exactly. As a non-Chicagoan who, has had enough Chicagoans tell me the stories over time, I know that they did. They left that impression very clearly. James, so just very quickly, I want to be conscious that we leave time for some questions. But what most people probably don't know on the call is that March is usually one of our biggest times of year for retail and for instant tickets specifically. So when we were sitting in early March last year, we were ready with a campaign around instant tickets with, we wanted obviously to have a big time of year as we would expect. Obviously, COVID hitting right at that time had a big impact. Can you just give a brief example of some of the pivots that marketing made at that time to make sure that March and April were as successful as possible, but also sensitive to the environment that we were working in? You're on mute, James.
We'll start with the sensitivity bit, actually, because I was thinking as Mark was talking, this concept of a purpose and ours being a champion for the people of Illinois is also the way we behave as a business. And this was created before COVID, but during the very beginnings of COVID and still today, we have over 7,000 retailers and we know, and along with a lot of you on this call, that, they have had a very, very tough time. And one of our absolute goals, delivering to our purpose of a champion to the people of Illinois, was the health and well-being of our network and their employees. And we spent a lot of time delivering to that purpose, certainly at the outbreak of COVID and all through last year, in ensuring that our retailers were getting the very best from the Illinois Lottery and support, understanding, awareness, education, and so on. And it was an incredible journey that we learned a tremendous amount about. But more importantly, it was very authentic and it was very transparent and it was meaningful. Why? Because we were just delivering to a purpose that we'd already begun and one that we believed in. And I think, Kelsey, to your point, that also related in the pivot from the ads that we started to produce in the very early days of COVID. We were able to pivot very, very quickly from the old world into the new. We launched 2 ads, actually. One was called Home, which was our contribution under the banner of a champion of the people of Illinois, and our tagline now, which is Illinois is full of winners, was a contribution to thank all our frontline workers. It was called Home. It was actually made by a director and his wife who was a nurse. And I think we were the very first brand in Illinois to come and out on television with a committed advert to the front line, which was also very genuine. But also our first ad, for instance, was the first ad in Illinois which used what we call talent, the actors in the ad actually wearing face masks. So those were 2 big firsts for us. And it wasn't because we wanted to be first. It was because we were delivering to our purpose of a champion for the people of Illinois and Illinois is full of winners, both in our corporate citizenship role, celebrating and supporting those frontline workers, and in our trading role, which was, in that case, to promote our March instance category.
Thanks, James. And I know we have some examples of both the digital assets that have been used through the last year, as well as some of those marketing assets. We're running a little bit short on time, but Mark, do you want to start with just any of the highlights that you want to call out on the next few pages on those digital assets?
Sure. I mean, to me, this is my favorite slide. Well, in addition to Michael, because it's so diverse. It's what you see here is this panoramic version of really our world. And going left to right, you have the causes and the connectivity to HIV and AIDS, and the first responders and the people that keep us safe, and from a brand experience perspective. These are well-produced, highly thoughtful assets that our studio team was able to create. There was calls to action for both retail, which was struggling, of course, at certain times for the scratch-off games, and at the same time, a sense of freedom and empowerment and enjoyment and hope and joy that you could basically portray with some of the ads in the middle, in terms of like, look, do this on your own terms in a safe environment that makes you happy and entertains you at a time when you really need it. And then finally, notably, all the way to the right, only at that point are you really talking about the dollars. Are you really talking about the 231 million or whatever it is at the moment? It's about the jackpot. But as importantly, it's about the experience and the joy and the hope that we wanted to convey digitally and in retail, and connecting those dots.
I think just to support that in two ways, actually, Mark. One is we monitor our brand very closely. And after the first 6 months of this platform being launched, our brand metrics have all gone up, which for those of you who do work with brand metrics, getting an extra point is a lot of hard work. And in some cases, we've moved up 8-9 points. So on our brand value creation, that has certainly turned the corner. But secondly, for those of you who've been in Illinois over December and January, you will have noticed that we had two of our Powerball and Mega Millions were over $1 billion. But interestingly, our sales, 10% of our sales were, for those two periods, were on those jackpots. The remainder were on all our other games, which shows that we're engaging much harder now and trading much better with the brand platform that we have in all those other games outside of Mega Millions and Powerball. Kelsey.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do want to, we have more that we can go through, but I do want to take a pause. And Jan, perhaps if there are any questions that we want to cover, I just want to make sure we have time for those before we go through any of the other assets that are in here.
Actually, I think I'd love that if you can show some of the commercials, because those are always fun to see. And then we'll see if we have a couple I do have a couple questions. Would love to be able to see if we can sneak those in and then go to questions.
Okay, sounds good. James, is there I think, Greg, if we skip forward a couple of slides.
Yeah, let's just show home. So there's keep going, Greg. Yeah, so this is the commitment that we made to the frontline workers. We started. Just rewind, Greg, if we can. And we just need to make sure there's some sound.
Yeah, I think, Greg, we're missing volume.
Okay. So let's look at this ad. And this ad came out in March last year.
Hey, miss you guys. Out here, there's a storm on shaking the sea. Back home, there's a light on waiting for me. Here with the needle on the record player, spinning my old face.
Healthcare workers are under a lot of pressure right now, putting in countless hours and putting themselves at risk. Many aren't even going home in fear of infecting their families. They're scared to go to work.
In the city where we first met, and you could hold my hand.
Thanks, Greg. I think we'll, Greg, just intro the next one, we'll just load up the Claude ad. We'll probably miss this one. We'll miss this one, I think, and just load up the Claude one. Just for those of you just that are interested, the Reinhardts, the family you saw are a genuine family. The husband was the director of our agency, and his wife actually was a healthcare worker working in from a hotel. And that was probably, I think, one of the first socially distant adverts in our state. So very proud to do it. It got a lot of feedback, and most importantly, and I hope you watching it will feel that it was very authentic, because that's where the brand certainly had moved to. And I also challenge those who know the lottery, if you'd seen that ad 4 or 5 years ago, it would have probably looked completely out of place to what the then brand was doing. This second ad, hopefully you will have seen at Christmas. Part of our brief for our Christmas tickets was to bring a bit of joy and fun to Illinois. We'd had a very, very tough year, all of us. And again, as a brand, as a champion of the people of Illinois, we just wanted to bring a smile to people's faces at a period of time which we knew was going to be very difficult for a lot of people. So this was Claude.
En fête et en délire, suffoquant sous le soleil et sous la joie, et je crispe mes poings maudissant la foule qui me vole l'homme qu'elle m'avait donné que je n'ai jamais retrouvé.
Scratch off. We don't know if he won or didn't, but it's a great ad. The music stays up. Music definitely stays in your mind. I know you talked a little bit about this, but just to maybe recap, what are some of some of our smaller mid-sized businesses can take away and implement easily and cost effectively?
I'm just thinking, Kelsey, if you just want to go to that last slide, I think that could help if it's there, Greg. Whilst Mark, maybe you answer, but let's get that last slide up.
Okay.
While you work on that last slide, I happen to have lots of contemporaries that have small businesses, medium-sized businesses that, tend to ask me questions about how to apply some of the ideas that we use in bigger contexts. And the one piece of advice that I always find myself providing is make it simple, even if it's an Excel spreadsheet. Keep track of what you do, figure out what you want, and just, even if it's not perfect, be disciplined about what it is that you track and how you're going to go respond as a result of what you learn in that Excel spreadsheet. It's free, and you can work your way up to more sophisticated ideas and tools as you evolve.
I think the other thing, and Jan, I think we spoke about this last time we met, is, we're in a world at the moment where we can get caught up in but what is my competitor doing? And should I do that? Or should I do this? And even a brand like ours, a big brand like ours, trust me, we're struggling with these decisions as much as a small businesses. And I think what my response to your question also is just believe in what you do. And if you get some of these basics right, it is going to help you in an ever-changing world that we live in right now. Stick to your course and don't be put off if you see your competitors pivoting. It doesn't mean you have to. If you have that purpose, if you have the strategy, if you have the talent and the discipline, then the hard part is just staying true to that. And don't get caught on the wrong foot just because somebody else is doing something and you think, should I be doing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add, we often check with ourselves. If you were to go ask people in the company, and this applies whether there are 3 people in the company or 100 or thousands. If you were to go ask someone in the company what the purpose is and what their focus is, would you get the right answers? And I think just challenging and reflecting on whether the answer to that is yes or no. And if the answer is no, then it really is as simple as putting the work in on authentically believing in what that purpose is for yourself, and then making sure that your employees are able to answer that question as well and know how they become a part of it.
Actually, that was a question I wanted to ask. You talked a lot about purpose, and that makes complete sense, from, the moment that you walk into an office to the CEO. What are some books or articles that you would recommend for all of us that we could access to be able to begin implementing that within our organization?
That's a good, James, do you want to start on that?
I will find the Bible for small business. I just need to make sure that I'm quoting the right book. So but it's by Russell Brunson, and it's about funnel management. And really anything he writes for medium-sized business is, I'll put the link into the chat, but it's universal and foundational.
Yeah, another one that's a classic that we reference in various ways all the time is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And we talk constantly about the flywheel. We talk about, is everyone on the bus? And I think just those it's referenced a lot for a reason, and a lot of the principles in there are ones that we really live and breathe by. And then there's some others. One of the things when we were looking at OKRs, and again, I don't want the fact that objectives and key results sounds like something technical to intimidate people. This is really just a simple way to get focused. But there's a TED Talk that Andy Doerr does. If you just look up Andy Doerr, DOERR, TED Talk, you'll find it. And it's really like a 12-minute intro to the objectives and key results framework, but talks all about that, getting people focused, getting them aligned, and simple ways that you can look at doing that.
And on brand, I would recommend Simon Sinek. So Simon Sinek introduced us to the concept of why are you doing what you're doing, which led to the whole concept of purpose. So businesses tend to talk about the what and the how first. And his breakthrough was actually we should talk about the why. So please look him up, Simon Sinek. He'll talk to you. Lots of videos. He actually broke through on a TED Talk actually a few years back. But he's certainly someone to take advice from. But what I would say about brand, certainly to the small business owner, is you are the brand. And what you started is the brand that you believed in. So sometimes it's good just to go back and sit down and reflect on why did you start, and you'll find your brand again way simpler than trying to maybe find it in other places.
Great. Well, and I'm going to wrap it up with one last fun question. What are you watching or reading during the lockdown that you would recommend to the rest of us?
Okay.
Start with Kelsey.
I
put you on the spot.
through a book called Think Again by Adam Grant, which I cannot recommend wholeheartedly enough. It's fantastic. It's all about questioning whether what we believe is something that deserves being revisited, and opening our minds to new views and opinions, and taking a scientific approach to how we think about things. Highly recommend.
Great. Mark, just because you're in that order on my screen.
I'm rereading for the second time Shogun, which doesn't seem like something that is business oriented, but there's life lessons in there that are just universal. And then Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day by Jay Shetty, which I think is a bestseller. And then Every Day, The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, which helps you kind of stay focused in a time of chaos.
Great. And
well,
James,
firstly, I'm
last but not
dyslexic,
least.
so I'm not a great reader. but certainly for me, I have been watching the Mars landing of Perseverance, and I'm inspired by it. And I think for me, my big takeaway from that is, and I think Mark spoke about it with the Bulls, is I think when you looked at when it landed, you know, after the 7 minutes of terror, as they call it, when everyone jumped up at that moment, I truly understood what collaboration and teamwork was. You know, you imagine the different, the enormity of the different types of people, companies, partners, stakeholders to get that on Mars. Truly, for me, was teamwork excellence, and truly taught us how collaboration can achieve great things.
Those are all great suggestions. I look forward to reading some of those books and talking to you all about it. Let's give them all a virtual hand of applause. And James, Mark, Kelsey, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody at Camelot for your support of the Chamber. Your membership as well as your sponsorship is greatly appreciated. And if you guys want to get in touch with any of them in the future, please reach out to me at jcostner@chicagolandchamber.org. I'll be happy to connect you. And I hope that you all stay around for the reception, which will be starting in a few minutes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Another great way to end the day networking. So thanks again to Camelot.
Thanks so much,
and have
Jan.
a great rest
Great
of the day.
fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.